There's a picture floating around of the boar that Oden sliced in half in chapter 961, and in 963, it shows that it was stitched together and for some reason is still alive. Whether jokingly or not, this has been used as a reason to criticize Oda for the way deaths are handled in One Piece, so that post indirectly led to this video. It's been a thought of mine for a while as to deaths in their meaning, and not just in One Piece but in anime as a medium. Outside of being nasty spoilers, death in anime serve a purpose, more often than not. Some deaths are not executed as well as others, i.e. Neji and Jiraiya from Naruto. Not saying Jiraiya's death wasn't executed well, I'm just comparing those two deaths from the one series and how drastically different their impact was. Both were sacrifices, but something that's important that doesn't get mentioned is the actual build-up and reasoning for character death. You try not to be too logical in anime or fiction in general, especially if the initial setup of the world makes the supernatural normal. However, illogical outcomes typically overshadow premeditated sacrifices. When a character dies in an anime, you ask a few questions as either a way for coping or rationalizing the situation. Does this death make sense? Could it have been avoided? Is it being used for a catalyst or just to progress the story? Since the main focus of this video is death in One Piece, we'll examine the two major ones, which is Ace and Whitebeard, but there are a few more things to cover. I think it's important to point out that tone matters in anime and manga if we're being specific, but that is a great indication of the theme of a story. If you can understand the tone of what you're currently engaged in, it's pretty clear where the story is going thematically, as well as how you should interpret certain moments in the story. One Piece in general has a very informal, sometimes sarcastic and cheerful tone. However, that can shift at any moment to accentuate the theme of One Piece, will and friendship. Using chapter 1 as an example, our first introduction to Luffy, he's a pretty young kid with a knife in his hand. A pretty serious thing at face value, but the tone didn't match the action. Using Luffy's facial expressions and certain words gave it away. Luffy specified and said, "I'm not joking this time. I'll prove it all for you to see." So with the facial expressions, dialogue, and just how bright this scene is the beginning of a story, this is a dead giveaway even at the beginning that this kid does this a lot, and it's meant to be comedic, cheerful even. This tone continues throughout the chapter with his interactions with Shanks and his crewmates, is giving you from the onset the essence of the story, which sometimes can be misleading on purpose, but normally you notice the shift. The shift comes pretty quickly after that again, using specific details and writing techniques. So a random guy enters the shop. One of the techniques was using impact lines to show the force of entry by this character, which is Higuma. Also the silhouette at the beginning to make you focus on this character, which is saying in so many words, this guy might be trouble. Also using the nameless characters in the area by immediately halting what they're doing to show that this is a tonal shift. With all this setup, you know something bad was inevitable. The moment had several uses, but the main purpose was not to show Oda's great use of tone, but rather Shanks' values and also a life lesson for Luffy. Oda made great use of Shanks' values to be the catalyst for a shift in tone, but also made sure to keep his signature comedy in as an indication that this is serious, but everything will work out in the end. I mentioned Luffy versus Bellamy on purpose to get back to it because the use of tone in their two interactions is absolutely brilliant. Tone can be changed by several things: environment, dialogue, and as shown with Higuma, characters. Upon entering Jaya, we're told it's a town where people sing, laugh, and kill each other. Already, it's setting the stage for an impactful moment. Bounties. Bounties are really important, and they're a great indication of threat level, and up to that point, the story made it clear that if you had a bounty, you were therefore a rival. Speaking of rival, in that same chapter, after showing us 3 different bounties, Luffy has his moment with Blackbeard, who we assume to be his final rival, but this was more so towards the overarching theme of the story, referencing a man's dreams, but the use of bounties in Blackbeard does have the undertone of rivalry. Using almost the same techniques as he did with Shanks and Higuma, he does with Luffy and Bellamy, although it's a bit more direct. He'd already shown us the type of character Bellamy is. He's shown us his bounty, the undertone of rivalry, the preface statement of the type of town Jaya was, the tonal shift from Luffy's competitive banter with Blackbeard, and this again was inevitable and something bad was about to happen. One Piece chapter 224, Stop Dreaming, is a very heavy chapter as the elements and cues are all there for chaos. The drip of blood from a blade, the individuals with bounties being in one place, and Luffy's genuine gullible nature. I don't mean to shift the tone of this video, but the panel after Bellamy walks in and Zoro is telling Luffy it seems like Bellamy has business with him is fucking hilarious. Okay, back to it. While Oda used Nami's question about Sky Island to completely shift the subject, the tone remains the same, but the theme is now highlighted: a man's dreams. It immediately went from a battle of fists that Luffy would have won easily to a battle of ideals. The weak will of Bellamy in Luffy's eyes matched the impact of his hits. They were non-existent. Remember Rayleigh stated, "No doubt that is true strength"? Well, Bellamy in hindsight, you know there's doubt there, but even through his words about Sky Island, he was filled with doubt. This man didn't deserve Luffy's fists. He was not a dreamer. Blackbeard confirmed what we suspected with the Battle of Ideals, and then had one of the best panels in One Piece when he told Luffy, "A man's dream never ends." This rings even more true after knowing truly how ambitious Teach was, but these weren't just words to him. He actually lived by them. As similar as Blackbeard and Luffy were, they had extreme differences, and this interaction only made it clearer that in a parallel universe, Blackbeard and Luffy would actually be great friends. The second meeting with Bellamy was not a battle of ideals or dreams, but straight up teaching him a lesson. The build-up in Catalyst was very similar to Chapter 1. You're not worth it in the beginning due to the things I actually value. Now you've heard the things that are important to me. This I take seriously. The sad truth is that Bellamy's own insecurities made him project that upon anyone with dreams of their own. In his mind, he felt like if he couldn't reach his own dreams, which at the time was true acknowledgement from Doflamingo, then I suppose no one could. The second meeting again between Luffy and Bellamy had a completely different tone than the first time, compounded by the title of the chapter. The 100 Million Man implies that this chapter, Luffy proves his worth from Bellamy's perspective. Last meeting, Luffy proved his worth to himself by not attacking Bellamy, but due to him hurting his friends at this point, he is now willing to sink to his level. The interesting twist here is that Bellamy and his compadres had not gotten an updated bounty poster for Luffy. So while they felt like he wasn't worth 30 mil, Luffy was about to prove why he was worth 3 times that. Luffy's approach was as direct as Bellamy's by calling him out by name, which Bellamy notices the new brashness to Luffy's approach. Luffy actually calls him outside, and I love what Oda did here. He gave Luffy the upper ground to show that he is now in a position of power. Back to the theme of rivalry and dreams, Bellamy states that he beat Cricket fair and square as a pirate, and to show that the difference between last time was night and day, Oda had both meetings taking place literally at night and day. Luffy even goes on to say things were different during the day, and well, we know how this ends for Bellamy. The purpose of this discourse is to make it easier to break down Ace and Whitebeard's death by using Oda's own history of tone and story elements to reveal the outcome. So how is death actually handled in One Piece? Well, death, as stated before, can be used in several ways. However, it shouldn't be in the sacrifice of the actual narrative. A few confirmed deaths from somewhat prominent characters include Bobbin, Sheepshead, and Jinrami, but I refuse to believe Lord Bobbin has passed on. Seriously though, while these characters were prominent, they served no true purpose to the future of the narrative, so their deaths left little to no impact because that was the intent. For more important characters, the build-up typically is very immense. Some people forget about Ace's journey, and while it was highlighted in Alabasta, it was actually referenced before then. All the way back to the Drum Kingdom, it shows Ace was looking for Blackbeard and also Luffy. Ace then meets Luffy at Alabasta, and the story reiterates that Ace is looking for Blackbeard. As mentioned earlier, Luffy ran into Blackbeard before knowing it was him and had another encounter with him before Sky Island. All the while, this is building the tension of this fated meeting. Over 200 chapters later, we finally have Ace versus Blackbeard, and after that battle, it specifically states that the battle between Ace and Blackbeard was a trigger for a very big incident in the coming future, Marineford. So in chapter 154, chapter 159, chapter 236, and chapter 441, these are the chapters Oda heavily focused on things leading to this battle, and we find out an actual war will be coming in chapter 501. So that's spanning over 400 chapters of buildup. These deaths were carefully mapped out to leave a lasting impact on the fan base, and we cannot discount the buildup of Impel Down and how important that was to the culmination of this entire saga. But the focus here is the death and how it's handled. While it can be said that Oda seems to heavily prioritize important character deaths and in some ways throw other deaths to the wayside, it's partially true. But if every death was handled the same, or the inclination was given that every death had the same value, the lasting impact of deaths like Ace and Whitebeard would not be there. Again, I want to point out the drastic importance of Luffy's journey and sacrifice to get to Marineford. Through the use of his special power of making allies with a dab of luck and a leprechaun, Luffy somehow made it to his destination with suitable companions to run support and to aid him in his quest. Now fast forward to Marineford. Due to the massive buildup that spanned over 350 chapters and became more obvious around chapter 441 because by this point you were invested and the stage was set. The stakes were obvious, and even the participants felt the heaviness of this this moment. Veteran pirates from the New World were getting chills due to the sheer amount of pressure in these early moments. The rules were simple. Who wins gets to go home, but everyone knew going to war with the perceived strongest man in the world and his entire pirate crew and allies would obviously yield casualties. We met Ace officially in Alabasta, but we got to know him at Marineford. Oda incorporated timely flashbacks to again heighten the sensitivities of the moment by taking advantage of the obvious tone and anticipation. He did this by using the things that had been set in motion for hundreds of chapters to bring more meaning to the sacrifice that Whitebeard was about to make. The theme of this arc was sacrifice, as shown from the very beginning with Oars. Oda made it clear from the very beginning of the war that people were going to die, and that was the only way to make it out alive, through sacrifice. By showing us this, if we the viewers understood that, obviously the characters in the story would understand this as well, and as Whitebeard stated, this led to many acts that towed the line of heroic or suicidal. While it was impactful, it was realistic. In war, some sacrifices might be necessary, but some might not be. But in the moment, how can you tell? And this one was no different. While the sacrifice of everyone made it clear that the stakes were indeed high, we never lost sight of the reason for being there. Ace. Oda made it clear that all of this was because of Ace and brought us into his feelings during this entire debacle. Every sacrifice people made for him was a needle to his heart because deep down he knew this probably could have been avoided if he were different. Different is apt here as opposed to making better decisions because even though most would say smarter, that's neglecting the essence of what makes a character. This wasn't a plot-driven narrative where the character makes a decision for the sake of just plot. This was displayed as a real person with real demons from childhood that they couldn't avoid no matter how much they decided to run away. So because of this, Ace knew he could never run away. Not lost in all this is the brilliant placement of Garp and the role he had in Ace's life. Conflicting feelings were apparent, but this was to add to the emotional jambalaya and brought that conflict to the audience. At that moment, you're wondering, what side do I take? Do I go with Garp and his conflicting feelings of being a Marine and having to sacrifice everything? Or do I side with Ace, someone who was doomed from the very beginning due to his father's demon blood, or that's how Sengoku put it. While Luffy's appearance for the viewer seemed like a ray of hope, for Ace, it made things worse. Luffy showing up meant even greater stakes. If the Whitebeard pirates were to lose, I've already placed my second family in harm's way, my brothers in arms. Now my blood brother, which is how Ace viewed Luffy, has been dragged into all of this. I can't help but feel helpless and weak. I know my younger brother is weaker than I am and I got captured. So what's going to happen to my little brother? Oda used Luffy as a rational voice even through his irrational actions. Luffy was in a large pond with big fish, but he didn't care. He was willing to die to save his brother. I want to get back on task because this isn't a Marineford breakdown, so I won't get into every single detail of character motivations, but before we skip forward, a quick but necessary mention of Kuma. Kuma and Ivankov's interaction added to the theme of Marineford, sacrifice. Kuma was a higher up in the revolutionaries and he seemingly made the ultimate sacrifice, but for what reason? Oda was driving home the purpose of this saga. From Sabaody, the Amazon Lily to Impel Down, sacrifices and allies were needed to get to this stage, but even more would be necessary to get out alive. In the midst of thematically telling us that sacrifice is absolute and everyone is on one accord and in full support of each other, we see the danger of too much sacrifice in Squad. This is a deeper rooted issue which one could say was started by Whitebeard and how he handled the entire Thatch situation with Blackbeard, but Squad saw sacrifice and he felt like it was too much to be true. Akainu obviously sped up this thought process, but something was already there. And to Squad, the thought of Whitebeard doing this for any of his crewmates was unfathomable. Squad felt like every other crewmate for Whitebeard and his allies were the sacrifice for Ace, and he wasn't ready and willing to do it. At that moment, Squad did not understand the importance of sacrifice, the value of sacrifice. That's why meaningless words from the opposite side was able to penetrate his heart. He had doubts about Ace from the beginning, and Akainu gave him a reason to give into those doubts. The beginning of the end for the Whitebeard pirates was the actual stab to Whitebeard, but it sparked a fire under him, which was to reinforce the reason behind their actions, reminding his crew and allies that the stakes were always high and your lives were always at risk, but that's why you follow me, because I would do the same for each of you. It doesn't get highlighted as much, but Whitebeard putting his arm around Squad, it impacted all of his crewmates and allies, because even someone that did that to Whitebeard, by placing a sword through him, he still treated him like one of his sons. So after that point, it was a second wind for his crew. I like the contrast of dialogue from characters because that normally tells a story within itself. We had characters saying Whitebeard was amazing, but others like Jinbei was not feeling too great about the situation. I mean, how could you? Whitebeard was now making a move, but he seems like he was only making a move because he had to. And we can't forget he was already stabbed. For any fitting end, for further build-up, and to also relax the audience, there's a showcase, and this is a slight shift in mood and momentum, and and Whitebeard, the perceived strongest man in the world, was now on the move and things were turning in their favor. But then here comes the admirals. Akainu immediately takes the momentum back by not only killing several pirates but also destroying the ship, because he's saying now there's no way out. Whitebeard bleeding and sweating, and a moment of humility is when Whitebeard is unable to destroy the execution platform due to the barricade, and it was almost as if he was saying, I should be able to do this. And I think moments like these are used to show that someone who's all powerful, they're gonna have moments in which they can't do things. When you accentuate the fact that they can't do these certain things, it is used as an indicator to show that they are indeed slowing down. Whitebeard's speech was necessary to remind the men that their lives were on the line. Luffy never needed a reminder of this, as he went directly in front of the Navy's greatest force, the admirals, showing not only recklessness but his balls of steel. He bet his life back on Amazon Lily, and several times it impelled down. Sacrifice. Ace's emotions for most of the war is in preparation to die, but seeing momentum from the side of the Whitebeard pirates brings about new emotions within him. He now wants to live, and after seeing all the sacrifices made, he now hopes he can repay them and survive. Beautiful characterization for Ace and Whitebeard throughout this entire war, which does lead to a devastating moment. But that entire time for Ace, seeing all this sacrifice, Ace knew once he was free, if he got free, he would repay them tenfold. The momentum shifts throughout the arc makes it amazing as well, because Luffy stumbles, Whitebeard picks him up, and when Whitebeard stumbles, Luffy picks him up. While he wasn't as strong as Whitebeard, it showed that the future was scary if he continued on his journey, which is what the higher-ups were afraid of. By telling everyone to support Luffy, Whitebeard knew the end was coming. He even said he wanted to see what was beyond this age. His age. There was only so much he had left to sacrifice. Now continuing this theme of sacrifice is Garp, the Marine hero but also the grandfather of Ace and Luffy. His life's goal was to not only be a Marine and serve the people and the world government, but to also put Luffy and Ace on the path to become a Marine. But now he's faced with a choice. Do I sacrifice this life and name I've made for myself due to their terrible decisions? After everything, he couldn't find it in himself to deny Luffy the opportunity to save Ace. The reason why the death of Whitebeard and Ace resonated so much is due to the commitment Oda had to showcasing their flaws and their strengths. Whitebeard more so before the war, leading up to it, but as great as these characters are, they had highs and lows and operated as actual people instead of drawn figures in a premeditated story. The prostrate in front of a father figure to whom you owe everything is the ultimate sign of respect, and Whitebeard through it all was willing to give it all up for Ace. But the difficult thing about bonds is that just because someone is willing to die for you doesn't mean you'd be willing to die for them. In Whole Cake Island, Jinbei refused to leave his comrades behind even though they were willing to make that sacrifice. I can delve deeper into Ace's psyche here, but that's for another time. I leave this bit about who Ace was. As a character, running away was the most difficult thing for someone like him, especially in the midst of disrespecting someone who literally risked it all to save him. Not just at Marineford, but in life, Ace was headed down a path of destruction. In his novel, Ben Beckman even said so much that even though he was strong, he wasn't going to live a long time if he continues down the route he was going. His goal was to be more prominent than his father. He wanted to get rid of the stain of gold. Whitebeard was the one who saved him from that hell. So with Akainu's words, they took on a whole new meaning. Compounding these flaws as a character, and Luffy's sacrifices that reared its ugly head at the worst possible time, waiting this entire war and seeing everything everybody went through, this led to Ace's death. The tone was set, the build up, the characterization, the sacrifice, and Whitebeard's death was a thing of beauty as well. The end of an era in so many ways. All that was said to say this: Oda doesn't rarely kill characters because he's afraid. Characters aren't killed often because he always wants to wait for the perfect time when everything is at stake with appropriate sacrifice. Think of Yasui's death. And it wasn't as impactful as these two, I agree. But everything was on the line and sacrifices were made for others. Think about Pedro and Pell. Well, not Pell, but you understand. One Piece is a character series, so therefore, when a character is killed in Oda's eyes, the moment should be grandiose and everything should be in place. This may be a flawed system due to the simple fact that certain times things aren't going to be perfect for someone to die. That's death. It's sudden and unexpected. Not Neji unexpected, but important nonetheless. And at the beginning, I talked about the questions asked when a character death happens. Does it make sense? Could it have been avoided? And was it just used to progress the story? Both Ace and Whitebeard's deaths made sense. It honestly could not have been avoided based on the character traits established within the story. Their deaths were indeed a catalyst for change, and not only in Luffy, but also the world government. Everyone learned from this, but it felt right, even through the pain of loss. These characters were treated like real people and most importantly, went out on their own terms. Ace died for his brother and Whitebeard died for his men, his family, his sons. Standing up, never turning his back to run away, I find it interesting that we laud Whitebeard for this feat, but critique Ace for the same thing. Maybe I'll break it down even further when I talk about Ace's life and death. We'll end it with this. The death of the Mary, I'm sure people are wondering, was I going to talk about that? But that deserves its own video because that specific death had an entirely different meaning to it. So that's why it wasn't mentioned here. And in a nutshell, in One Piece, what does death really mean? Well, it's not when a man is shot in the heart with several pistols and stabbed with numerous swords and knives, not when half his head is blown off, or when someone is impaled for protecting their brother. A man truly dies when he's forgotten. So for Fire Fist, Ace, and Edward Newgate, due to inherited will, these dreams will never die. So guys, that's it for me. Give me your thoughts on deaths in One Piece. Of course, there were several things I could have covered. Again, the death of Mary and several other moments leading up to it, but I didn't want this video to be too long. And I wanted you guys to understand exactly my perspective and how I view deaths in One Piece. And I hope you did based on how I broke it down, because for deaths in One Piece, again, it's formulaic. And so Oda wants everything to be perfect, and he somehow wants it to match their life. He wants their death to be just as impactful. So like the video if you did. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Shout out to my patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. I appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at BragoDAce. Follow me on Instagram at BragoD.Ace. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.